What's up guys? On this video I'm going to talk about how I built this Algae Turf Scrubber for $100. Let's go. This is the first time I'm using an Algae Turf Scrubber. In the past I used a refugium. I just didn't like how the refugium would get other nuisance things growing in it. And I just felt like it was too much of a maintenance pain. Sometimes a chaeto or Carlopa, whatever I was growing, would die. Sometimes it would grow really good. And sometimes there'd be pests and junk growing in it, and I just didn't like it. The only reason that it took me so long to have an ATS is because of the price. I think it was about $800-900 for a small medium-sized one. And I figured, you know what? I could try to build it for as cheap as possible. As you see on this picture, the scrubber has been running for about 8 days now. Definitely seeing some hair algae growing on there. I've seen a really good increase in the pH in my tank. Even on day 1, when there was no algae growing on there, the pH went up 0.05, and that was really good. Now it's about 2 weeks since I've used the scrubber, and the pH just keeps going up now that algae is growing on the screen. The benefit to using an Algae Turf Scrubber is, first you could use it in freshwater, ponds, saltwater, reef, doesn't matter. But you're harnessing nature, providing algae, the thing that you don't want in your tank, the most optimized place to grow and thrive. An algae scrubber allows algae to grow, but the algae grows inside the filter instead of an aquarium or pond. This removes excess nutrients, scrubs the water, diminishes nuisance algae in the aquarium or pond. So I started off by using this hang on the back refugium. I got this for free years ago because it was broken. Also, I use this ATO reservoir. I picked it up off Marketplace for $30. You can find a lot of used acrylic products that a lot of people don't want as soon as there's a little bit of damage. But I figured you could just use it, repurpose it, and it's good as new. You have to remember, this is not really holding water. It's holding a little bit of water towards the bottom, but it's holding more splashes. There's not too much weight on it, so even if you found acrylic that was a little bit thin, it would probably still work. But you could save a lot of money by looking for used acrylic. And if you can't find something used, I strongly suggest you guys look for a freshwater reservoir. My one's about 2 feet tall, 12 inches left to right, and 6 inches wide. And it has a clear panel, which is excellent. I never have to open up the top cap to see the algae. Here we are cutting the hang on the back filter with a grinder. And the ATO reservoir with a grinder, we're cutting out the faces. I left about 2 inches at the bottom, just so that there's a professional seal at the bottom, because I wasn't really trusting my seal. But I left about 1.5 inches overlap on the acrylic face. That way, it didn't have to be perfect. I used diamond coated drill bits at the bottom. These are for the drains. One's a primary and one's an emergency. The next hole is for the drip plate. One good tip is when you're drilling into acrylic, start off at an angle and then work your way down. Or you could make a template and clamp that template onto the acrylic and then drill. I used weld-on acrylic cement. Came with an applicator. I used a syringe and filled in the applicator and started gluing. This is the first time I'm gluing acrylic, so I left myself 1.5 inches on either side, so there's a lot of contact. So even if there's some air bubbles, it doesn't matter. There's so much acrylic glue going in there, and I figured it's better to be safe than sorry. If this was like a tank that had to hold water, there's no way I would trust this. But for this application, so far I've had no leaks. The amazing part about this was it felt like it almost instantaneously bonded the acrylic together, which was amazing to me. Most things take a long time to set. This stuff is like almost instantaneously. It was like magic. Here you can see my acrylic work. Not the best, but I trust it to hold water, and so far, so good. So I figured I would make good use of this acrylic by making some holders for my lights. I don't recommend anybody doing this the way I'm doing this. I don't think it was smart. It's probably better off using like a bandsaw or something to cut this acrylic in little strips. The reason why I didn't like it is because it was really small pieces and just didn't feel right. Here are the small pieces I didn't really like cutting, but it worked, so things you do to save a buck. Now I'm just gluing the light holders. I made sure I had a straight edge that was going onto the turf scrubber. The other angles, I really didn't care how they looked. I just used some scrap wood and some shims to place the light holders onto the acrylic and glue it away. Here I am using the grinder to cut out a slit for the mesh. I just clamped it onto my workbench and I left it long before I did the cut. That way it was just easier to clamp. I think it came out pretty well. I did it as straight as I could. Now I'm going to use some PVC cement and primer and glue the end caps. And I'm going to do the same thing for the union. For the mesh screen, I just used 2 zip ties. And it was really simple to get in there and just zip tie it. Make sure you guys get clear primer. I ran out of it, so I had this purple primer. You have to be a lot more careful. It tends to run by design. That way, when somebody's inspecting a plumbing job, they could see it that it's been primed. For my application, it's in the basement. I had purple primer laying around, so I didn't feel it was necessary to go out and purchase it. So before I installed this, I wanted to double check and make sure that I was getting sufficient flow through the mesh. And I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't just squirting out on one side. But after using it for a few weeks, I realized that honestly it doesn't really matter, because the water is going to just trickle, and even if it's coming out heavy in the middle, it's going to trickle its way out. So eventually I ended up grinding out the middle a little bit more, because I felt if it was too tight from the sides, eventually it just started squirting out through the holes. So I'd much rather have it squirting out in the middle and working its way out. So in other words, I'm just saying you don't have to have a perfectly straight line. It doesn't really matter. Next, I'm going to build a shelf 7 feet away with tapcons out of scrap wood that I had over the years. I just used plywood and some 2x4 I laying around. I used 2 3/4 tapcons. Then I just used a level and drilled it into the cement. I didn't feel comfortable with the Algae Turf Scrubber hanging off the wall without any legs. Even though it's strong enough, I just don't trust it. But I thought about what would happen by chance if something happened and the scrubber fell off the wall. What would happen is I would have over 150 gallons of water just squirt all over the place. Because I know that PVC plumbing will probably just come apart, and that would be a system crash. That's why I put 2 legs, just so I could sleep good at night. Next, I'm going to just put the shelf on there and make sure it's leveled. I did have to shim it in the back a little bit, make sure it's perfectly straight, but honestly, looking back, it doesn't really matter if it's a little off. Water's going to find its way down the mesh evenly regardless. Now I'm going to use my table saw and cut out 2 legs. These are pretty flimsy, but like I said, all I want to do is sleep good at night and make sure that the scrubber doesn't fall off the wall. Now I'm just using a miter saw to cut the legs to size. Now I'm going to use a jigsaw to cut out 2 holes at the bottom of the shelf. This will be for the drain 1 and drain 2. I definitely recommend you guys purchasing a jigsaw if you don't have one. I've had it for 7 years and I've used it only about 4 times, but it's made my life really easy. In the past, I probably would have just used like a drill bit, made like 20 different holes and cut it together, made a whole mess out of this board. Just having it at my disposal has made a bunch of projects pain-free. Now I'm going to attach the legs. Just made a pilot hole, put 1 screw on either side. Thought about putting more support on this, but I really didn't want to. I also use exterior white paint to paint all the way around the wood, just because I know there's going to be spillage. Now it's time to do hard plumbing for both the drains. Here I am just lining up where I'm going to put the holes in the wall. Now the good part is I had a lot of room for error on this project, so I wasn't too concerned. I'm going to be drilling the first hole, then I'm going to be drilling the second hole. I made sure I dry fitted all the plumbing before gluing it down. I used a marker because in the past, anytime I dry fitted my PVC and then when I went to glue it, put primer and then cement, I noticed the plumbing will go much farther into the fittings, and pretty much my plumbing was not exactly what I was dry fitting it for. So it doesn't have to be pushed all the way in. I find it's really hard to remove the PVC when you're dry fitting it. If you hammer it all the way in, it just becomes really difficult to take it out. So if you prime and you cement correctly, I don't think you'll have a leak, especially in a tank like this where there's not any pressure on the drains and very little pressure on the pump. But I definitely suggest you make sure you use primer and not just use the cement. In the past, I used cement only. I didn't know that you had to use primer on a fish tank, but you do, so don't skip that step. This is what I hate about the purple primer. Look and see how it drips all the way down. and me desperately trying to remove the spills. I did my first plumbing job on my previous system, 115 gallon SPS dominant reef tank, and that's the tank where I really had a really nice plumbing job. Here's a picture of my first job doing really good plumbing, and this is the tank before that where I didn't even know you had to use cement on the PVC. I mean, I had salt creeps all over the place in these tanks, and the outlets were covered with the salt. I'm surprised it didn't blow up. Alright, finally done. I waited 24 hours before testing it out. When you do a project like this for the first time and you don't know what you're doing, it does take a lot of energy to record every single part. So I'd appreciate it if you guys would like, subscribe, and leave a comment down and let me know what you guys think. Here it is turned on for the first time. I've been thinking about this for over a year, and to get it done for under $100, it feels very gratifying. This scrubber's been running for 3 weeks, and now the algae is growing like gangbusters, as you could see. Alright guys, thanks for watching. So this is how I spent $100 to build this. This ATL reservoir was about $40. I spent $20 on plumbing, and I spent $40 on the lights. Obviously, you may spend a little bit more. It will still be a lot less than you buying one online. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Nori sushi like.